the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
Let freedom ring.
It's the American way.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
God bless the USA. What's up, everybody? I am the Talk Radio Protege, and this is the Protege program. How was that intro? I don't know about you, but my chest swells up a little just listening to it. We're not here to listen to my hastily made mashups. We're here to talk about politics, and the number one issue coming off of last week has to be the failed Obamacare repeal. That's got plenty of lay Republicans in a frothing rage, especially at a few Republican senators. I'll name names soon enough, but first, let's talk about what was on the table. From this New York Times article, we had the displays, the records of the voting on all the senators for all three of the proposals that were laid on the table. There was the repeal and replace, repeal and repair. Not even close. Repeal and replace. I'll be calling it R&R from here on. Option, also known as the Better Care Reconciliation Act. There's the partial repeal amendment, also called the Obamacare Repeal and Reconciliation Act. And finally, the skinny repeal, also called the Health Care Freedom Act. As you can see, Republicans defeated themselves on all three of these measures. Now, what was in each of these measures? We'll begin, of course, with option number one, the Repeal and Replace Amendment, R&R. In the discussion draft of the bill, it's 142 pages long, so we're not going to go through that. What we're going to go through instead is this summary that I found of the bill, summary that was put together by a third party. I found it quite a bit easier to read, and I pulled what I believe are the most important provisions to make note of. First of all, in the R&R option, the guaranteed issuance of coverage, prohibition on pre-existing condition exclusions, and dependent coverage to age 26 were kept. For better or worse, these are some very popular clauses of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, especially that pre-existing condition one. That's what's got all of the moderate Republicans in such a tizzy. It's the one that the media is ready to hammer at any given moment for. You don't care enough. You don't care about those people with pre-existing conditions that just were dying in the streets before 2009. You know, the Affordable Care Act was an extra Christmas present for those folks. The folks that were dying in the. Oh yeah, that's right. It's illegal for hospitals to turn people away. Anyhow, yeah, those were all in there. No moderate Republicans should have been voting against the bill on those grounds. The next thing, this provision was to permit insurers to elect to sell, not even force them to sell, but elect to sell non-compliant. We'll talk about what the compliant is supposed to be with. Non-compliant plans outside of the marketplaces, the Obamacare exchanges. Now, in Obamacare, there was a provision that allowed the Director of Health and Human Services to set what were called essential benefits. These were the minimum pieces of benefits that your healthcare plan has to have in order for any insurance company to sell it on the open market. You're not allowed to buy any plan unless it's got X, Y, and Z, and everything else is extra, but the most basic package has to have all of these things. Let me tell you about some of those essential health benefits. I'm a man. I've got maternity coverage. If you're a man, you have maternity coverage. If you are a woman who has gone through menopause and you no longer have productive ovaries and wombs, you have maternity coverage. That's right. People that are never ever going to use those benefits are forced to buy them. You see, that's why I think it would have been great to release these requirements, to turn the essential benefits guidelines into suggestions. This would have been much more appropriate a role for the federal government, especially considering that I don't think the federal government should be telling people what they should buy when it comes to anything, especially healthcare. Nobody knows the type of insurance, not care, insurance that they need better than the consumer. Unless, of course, you're a progressive, then the government does. Now, this next one caused a huge stink in the left media and among Democrats. The provision that would, according to this summary, phase out Medicaid expansion to states that had adopted the expansion as of March 1st, 2017, from 90% in 2020, that was going to be the expansion of 90%, to traditional state match by 2024. So they could expand to 90% by 2020. They were just going to have to shrink back down over the next 4 years to 24. Now, listen to me carefully. $0 were going to be cut from the Medicaid budget by this proposition. 0. The only dollars that were going to be quote-unquote cut were future dollars that Medicaid doesn't even have in the budget yet. This is not even voting to stop an expansion. This is to slow down an expansion. There are 0 actual cuts in Medicaid in this bill. This is critical to understand, especially when we start talking about why the moderates voted the way that they did on this proposal. Now, the next one I love. This would have been awesome. A state option to require work as a condition of eligibility for non-elderly Medicaid adults who are not disabled or pregnant. Listen to that one again. An option for individual states. This means that if California did not want to require work as a condition, then they didn't have to. If Texas did want to require work as a condition, then they could. That's why it's called an option. An option for states to require who? Non-elderly, able-bodied, not pregnant adults to work for their Medicaid benefits. That is amazing. That is a conservative solution to an overspending and an overgrowth of a government entity. This would have been a good thing. This would have reduced the incentive for non-elderly, able-bodied, not pregnant, working, able adults from getting on Medicaid. And if you, quite frankly, if you think that no one is taking advantage of the fact that Medicaid is basically free money right now, you're naive or stupid or worse. This last one was pretty big for Republican, especially conservative voters. Prohibit federal Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood clinics for 1 year. That's very, very specific. That's not all federal dollars. That's not all dollars. That is shutting down 0 Planned Parenthood clinics. That is shutting off the funding of a very limited dollar type from Planned Parenthood. Just the Medicaid dollars. That's it. Lastly, and I didn't get this bullet up there, but the R&R option was going to repeal most of the Obamacare revenue, also known as taxes provisions. It's going to basically reset the tax code as it relates to healthcare to the pre-2009 Christmas state. All in all, this law would have been a step in the right direction. It definitely would have offered some economic relief to middle-class Americans in particular. However, I do agree with the opinions of some of the conservative and libertarian heavyweight hitters like Ben Shapiro and Rand Paul. They pointed out multiple times as soon as this bill was unveiled that it was not a repeal. In fact, Rand Paul, the day that it came out, said this is Obamacare light. And because it didn't do enough to roll back Obamacare, it was dead on arrival in the Senate. These 9 Republicans voted against this bill when it hit the floor. And you'll see up there are some moderates on there. Lisa Murkowski, Bob Corker, Lindsey Graham. Should have been voting yes for this bill. They didn't. Probably because of the scare tactics used by the media about the pre-existing conditions people and the Medicaid expansions. However, even if they had been able to get all of the moderate votes on this bill and Ms. Liberal Susan Collins, they probably weren't going to get it past Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, and Rand Paul. Those are the individuals I believe would have still voted no for this bill, even if all of the moderates had voted yes. This bill not really going anywhere. Kind of hurts my feelings. Well, no, it doesn't hurt my feelings. A little bit disappointing. You know, this was the... It's funny that the option that was supposed to appeal to the most individuals actually had the most no votes. Interesting. Now, the partial repeal, as called by the New York Times, is a little interesting. Here's the language of the bill. You see that right there? This is the shortest bill that we're going to look at tonight. It repeals the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and it repeals the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act in totality. This was the full repeal. And you're going to see in a moment that this didn't get all of the moderate votes. It got all of the conservative and libertarian votes, didn't get all the moderate votes. As I understand, the strategy behind the quote-unquote partial repeal was that we were going to repeal Obamacare today, and that meant that the policies were going to stop being implemented in 2020. And that was going to give Republicans a few years to come up with an adequate replacement. According to Vox, this was verified by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He called it the repeal and delay strategy. And this was tweeted about by Donald Trump, probably a reason that this bill made it to the floor. This was the solution that Republican voters, conservative voters, were looking for. The full repeal of Obamacare. We'll worry about replacement later. And this is where the Republican and conservative voters are getting frustrated. For 7 years, Republican congressmen have campaigned on repealing Obamacare. Many, many times, over a dozen times, they voted to do a full repeal, no replace, knowing full well that that bill was going nowhere. And in the first chance, the first real chance they have to come through for the voters, they flop hard in the 7 saddest anime betrayals of the Republican Party. Here are your representative officials who said, nope, we didn't mean it when we said repeal Obamacare. We're going to get into a few more of those names here in a moment. The especially sad no votes. Because finally we get to the skinny repeal amendment. Not as harsh as the full repeal, but not as Obamacare light as the R&R solution. Again, step in the right direction. Not the full repeal, but it was doing some of the right things. There was going to be a lot of relief for Americans, but there weren't going to be a lot of the other reforms that conservatives were wanting. Here's what the skinny repeal did. It guts the individual and employer mandate by setting the penalties for failing to meet those mandates to $0, including the scaling fees post 2016. One other thing it did is it set the medical device tax back. I think it rolled it back a couple of years, and it increased the allowable health savings accounts contributions. Now, the health savings accounts works kind of like this. I don't have full understanding, but this is my understanding of it. You have a percentage of your income that you're allowed to put into a health savings account, and it's tax-free income. You get to write that off as you didn't actually earn that for a year. And this would have increased that cap, would have allowed you to put more money into those health savings accounts. It's very important to point out that 0 Americans were going to be forced off of their health care because of this bill. 0. Count them. 0. By contrast, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, if you like your health care plan, you get to keep your health care plan, forced millions of Americans off the health care plans that they had chose. This bill was going to give Americans the choice to opt out. It's not even close to the same if I decide to cancel my health care coverage of my own volition. It's not even close to being the same as my health insurance company saying we're no longer providing the insurance plan that you wanted. Not even close. And this is where I really get ticked off. See, there were 3 buffoons that sold Americans down the river for media points. I'm getting ahead of myself. All we needed was for one of these morons to vote yes. We would have been tied at 50-50. Pence could have come in and tipped the balance in favor of the American people. This bill is actually the least the Senate could have done for Americans. And instead, these 3 were played like fools. And I call them, thanks to their yes votes, the Three Obamacateers. And first we have Susan Collins, the liberal. When it comes to Collins, honestly, we shouldn't have been surprised. You know, she did vote against the Affordable Care Act in 2009, but in 2014, on the eve of her re-election, Susan Collins said it's too late to repeal the Affordable Care Act. She was very hung up on those pre-existing conditions people. She really didn't want them to be left out in the cold. And pre-existing conditions people were covered in all 3 versions of the Repeal and Replace bills that she was put to vote to last week. It's not the pre-existing condition people that she voted no for. She voted no because she's a liberal. She's a rhino. The next in the Obamacateers, the next turncoat, Lisa Murkowski, the moderate. Now, in my opinion, this is the most baffling of the turncoats. She gave a big speech on the Senate floor a few months back, year and a half, decrying the Affordable Care Act because of the harm that it was doing to Alaskans. Her election website from her most recent campaign conveniently does not promise a full repeal, but she does list these items from Obamacare that she would like to be kept around. You will notice that all of the repeal options that were put in front of her last week had these provisions present. All of them. All of the pre-existing conditions people were going to be taken care of. There were no rollbacks or repeals on pre-existing conditions. I didn't see anything in those bills about annual or lifetime limits. Did you? I didn't. The coverage up to age 26 wasn't going to be touched. Continuation of coverage afforded under Medicaid expansion. Expansion in dollar amount was going to be rolled back. Coverage wasn't going to be touched. That's the way I understand the bill. And maintaining access to Planned Parenthood facilities. 0 Planned Parenthood facilities were going to be shut down. They weren't even going to take away that much money from Planned Parenthood. It was just the Medicaid dollars. Just the Medicaid dollars that were going to be taken away from Planned Parenthood. I don't know about you, that doesn't sound like it was going to shut down any facilities. Maybe I'm just an idiot. She voted no across the board, and all 3 proposals maintained everything that she asked for, especially the skinny repeal. Especially the skinny repeal. There's no reason Lisa Murkowski should not have voted for the skinny repeal. And then we get to the most dramatic of the Obamacateers, Mr. John the Maverick McCain. You might remember when he was first called the Maverick back in the 2008 campaign. Do you know what people meant when they called McCain a maverick? Since 2000, when he lost the Republican presidential primary to George Bush II, McCain sides with the progressives when push comes to shove. Oh, he loves the cover that being a conservative gives him. After all, he voted no on the Affordable Care Act back in 2009, and as recently as 2000, wait for it, 16, this was in a campaign ad for McCain's re-election. McCain is leading the fight to stop Obamacare. You kidding me? When push comes to shove, in true maverick fashion, McCain voted not to stop the Affordable Care Act. If I sound like I'm mad, it's because I am. These 3 jugheads. I suppose I have to give exception to Collins because we really should have seen that one coming. Just sold Americans down the proverbial river for media adoration points. The media adoration of these 3 Republicans is over 9,000. If it was their goal to be loved and adored by the left media, at least until their status as useful idiots ends, they succeeded. Honestly, it's no wonder Americans want Congress to moveon.org with healthcare. Voters aren't stupid. They see the rhino writing on the wall. They see that repeal is not coming. Your voters saw through the lies of the Democrat Party in the presidential campaign of 2016, and I think they see through the smoke and mirrors of moderate and liberal Republicans. they see that repeal is not coming, not in this Congress. I'm sorry to leave it on a bleak note, but thank you all so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, there's going to be a quote-unquote tip jar PayPal link in the description if you want to make a one-time donation, or if you want to put an exclamation point next to your support, you can make a Patreon pledge. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up for alerts so you don't miss a single video. This concludes our broadcasting. Good night.